So just because you're a branch connected to the vine doesn't mean that you're not going to be pruned from time to time. So that's a double negative, right? And so I guess another way of saying that would be something like, being that you are a branch connected to the vine, expect to be pruned. And a pruning, is done not to harm you, but to make you grow more fruit. Okay, so I was thinking a little bit about branches and gardening and all kind of things like that. And so one thing that I have learned, and I'm sure you have too, is that not all branches get to be attached to the vine. Not all of them do. In fact, whenever I do tomato plants, and you probably do this too, is that whenever you buy one and you put it in the garden, you have this beautiful stalk that goes up, and then eventually what happens is that the first branch will come out of it, and then within a very short time after that branch comes up, a sucker will come up. Okay, right in that hub, a sucker will come up, and so that sucker, if you let that in there, it will take a lot of the energy from the branch and no tomatoes. So what a vine dresser does is pulls that and casts it out. Okay, so sometimes the branches or the suckers get cast off quickly. Now, continuing to grow the tomato, what will happen is that, in time, that you will have the vine growing, but then you'll have competing branches growing as if they were vines. And so I don't know if you've ever noticed that, and so you'll only have the vine, and then you'll start to see other things coming up, and then they start getting really big, and then what happens that if you let them grow along with the major vine, what will happen is you'll have very small tomatoes if you have any. So the vine dresser learns then how to snip those. Now, I never knew that until last year. Linda Snyder taught me that. So, because I always had junky tomatoes, I just never knew. And she said, well, it's because you let all these other branches act like vines. and so then I had my 8 tomato plants, and she came over to the house, and she gave me a training on how to do this. And so I was putting this up, and I'll tell you what, every time that I saw this beautiful thing coming up, I had to decide, is that a branch, or is that a branch wanting to take over to become a vine? And I had to make that decision, and it broke my heart to cut those, but I had to. And so I had to do it all the way up. And so, like you heard before, my tomatoes were 8 feet tall this year. That past year, I was harvesting tomatoes like I was picking from a tree. It was incredible, And so, sometimes the branches have to be pruned and thrown away, not immediately, but after they start to show themselves as competing with the vine. Now, I don't know much about roses, but I do have a friend who's, an expert rosarian, I think they call him. And he grows roses for show and wins all kind of prizes and stuff like that all over the country. And so I was with him one time, and just looking at his roses, which are the size of dinner plates. I mean, they are incredibly gorgeous. That's how beautiful they are. And then the season comes, and winter will be coming on, and what he does is he trims them, and it just makes them into nice little bushes. And he doesn't want to trim them too much because it's important for it to have a bush so that the major stalks don't get frozen. See? So I didn't know that. And then in the spring, what he then does is he goes and he cuts everything off, and there's like maybe 3 things there, and it just looks so incredibly pruned and trimmed, and I lose heart, and it looks awful, but there they are again, growing dinner plate size roses. Just amazing. So how do you stay attached to the vine? You got to be producing fruit. See? Or you become a branch that is disposable. So whenever you look at that gospel today, then what it's about is it's about naming who's to be named. So the branches, that's you and me. okay? The vine, that's Jesus, and the vine dresser, that's the Father, okay? Now, that you're here in church today and that you always keep coming back means you've made the cut, okay? You are a branch, okay? You're not what happens next in the gospel, that some of them are cut off, thrown away, kicked into the fire. You've made it. You're still the cut so far, okay? But there's something that's really important to keep us as branches that are producing fruit. So what are they? Two things. Okay, so how does a branch stay fruitful? Okay, number one is stay connected to the gospel. Got to stay connected to the gospel. And that stream of nourishment that comes to us has to go out into the world. And it has to go out into the world uncompromisingly. You see, uncompromisingly. What a lot of times we do is, I think, myself included, churches included, is we compromise to fit into the world. That's not what the gospel does. The gospel transforms the world. And if we're going to be connected and not disposable, then we have to be speaking the truth to power. We have to sometimes have to be showing people a different way to look at things, you see, that is gospel. Now, what is a Christian? Now, my friend Jay Geisler, some of you know him, he describes a Christian as this. This is what he'll say. A Christian is just like everybody else, except we're inside out, upside down, and backwards. So think about that for a minute. We're inside out. So say, for example, you have a grief against your brother or your sister within a church community. Say you have that. So the first thing you don't do is call the bishop. You see what I'm saying? The first thing you do is you examine yourself. See, we're inside out. So am I seeing this correctly? Is this something about me or whatever? Okay, so it's inside out. So say, for example, that you make that judgment then, I've examined myself and, I'm pretty clean here, or I have a couple little issues going on here, but I'm pretty clean. So then what does the gospel say that we do? Like the world, what they do is, they'll call the bishop. You see? What do? We go to the brother or sister privately. That's the first thing we do. If that doesn't work, then what we do next is we take a friend with us. And then if that doesn't work, then we go to the church. You see? That's not what the world does, okay? The world doesn't do it that way. The world will make these grandstanding kinds of things. See, we're called to be gospel to the world. Now, it's upside down. Like, the Magnificat, my soul doth magnify the Lord. And why? Because you have thrown the mighty from their thrones and have exalted the lowly. So who's going to inherit the earth? The poor of spirit, not the rich. Okay, and those who come first are last. Those who are last are first. We're backwards. See, the gospel message is so countercultural. And why is it meant to be countercultural? So that we can transform the world. You see, not to accommodate the world. So, as long as we keep doing that, we're indisposable. See, we're still a branch, and we can produce fruit. Now, that's sometimes hard to do, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure you've done that with your kids. I'm sure you've done that with your friends. I'm sure you've made choices based on those kind of things that are so countercultural. They're biblical. Yeah. Now, the second part is this. The second thing that keeps us as branches bearing fruit is this. You ever notice that whenever branches grow together and you look at the tree, it's like you don't know where one branch ends and the other one begins. Have you ever noticed that? And sometimes the branches are so intertwined and stuff like that and connected with the vine that sometimes you don't even know where the vine is. It becomes interesting. If you have ever clemitis or a wisteria, you know what I mean? My cousin, like my sister, she was there to raise me whenever I was growing up, Barbara, who lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. She had this gorgeous clematis off her porch. It was huge, and the blooms were just everywhere, but there were stems that were out of place, and Barbara is a perfectionist. Okay, so she decided one day to go and trim her clematis. So there she was, trimming away and stuff like that, and she everything that was untoward off, and she was so proud of it. She took a picture. The next day she went out and the whole thing was dead. She cut the vine. You see, because there's something about equality among the branches. See, we don't know where one ends and the other one begins, and so and that's how we need to be with each other. We are equal, that here a year and Connie's here 2 months, we're equal. You see, that you're here 30 years and I'm here a year, we're equal. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, that's interesting whenever you look at that first reading that Ruth did from Acts. Aren't you just mesmerized by the Ethiopian eunuch? We have to say something about him. Now, this is one of those places where the church really took off because of this story. And in the early days of it moving out of Judaism into Christianity to the Gentiles, this was big. So what happened here is you have the deacon Philip, and you know why deacons came about in Acts of the Apostles is because the church community, the Christian community, were now still reeling after the death of Jesus and afraid because there were some persecutions going on. So they were meeting together and alone. And what started to happen was at Mills, the widows, felt like they were being cheated, and so they started to complain because they weren't getting the best food that was being served, and so that's how deacons came about. So deacons came about because the mistreatment of the widows, and so that's where Stephen came and Philip came, and they became outstanding people, and that's what our ordained ministry of deacon is about. There. So Philip is really popular in Jerusalem. He becomes very popular to the church in Jerusalem, and all of a sudden he gets by the Spirit that he's to move to that wilderness road, which is between Jerusalem and Gaza. See, that's like Joel Osteen, a very popular mega church trainer, teacher, in Houston, being asked, okay, Joel, it's time for you to go to Northern Cambria, or to the Mon Valley, and that's kind of like what happens to Philip. And so, of course, he goes, and he ends up on the wilderness road, and lo and behold, there's the eunuch of Ethiopia in a chariot on his way home from a meeting in Jerusalem, and he happens to be reading the scripture, and Philip is there, sees him, goes over and says, what scripture are you reading? And he's reading Isaiah, and he's reading the thing about the suffering servant. And Philip then says to him, well, do you understand what you're reading? He says, how can I understand what I'm reading? I'm not even trained in this. And so he says, well, let me come in and train you. And so he gets in, sits with him, and this eunuch's heart gets filled with the fire of the Spirit, and then they're moving along the road, and it says, there's water, baptize me, and didn't say, you haven't gone through our 6-month program. What Philip says is sure, and so let's do it, you see. And then the church spreads in Africa, you see. So see, had he not had that light of foot, and sometimes, isn't it true that we sometimes don't have that, right? We kind of think you're only here for 6 months, what do you have to say about this? See? We don't run the risk of becoming disposable. See? So we're attached. Those are 2 ways you can keep attached. Okay, now, with all that said, here's the final part. Okay, now, being attached, expect to get pruned. Okay, so, because we want to bear the best fruits. Now, so we will get pruned. See, there's no doubt about it. And sometimes what happens whenever we get pruned, we think, well, Lord, I'm the good one. Why is this happening to me? I'm the one that's coming to church. Why am I getting pruned? See, well, the short answer is so that you can be much more productive. See, that's the thing, and that's what we have to believe as Christians. That's really important for us to believe. So, how did we get pruned? Here's kind of like how we get pruned. Okay, number 1, I had a friend who was going to school to be a lawyer. Went through all the courses, and and went to take the bar exam and failed. Went to take the bar exam again and failed. And I think there was like 2 more times he could take it and then have to move out of state or something like that. And somewhere, it was getting close. And he was there, why this craziness going on in my life? Why am I not passing this? I mean, I'm intelligent, I feel called to be a lawyer. Well, in that whole pruning going on, he then discerned he really had a vocation to become a doctor. He did. He made the reroute, and he's now a very successful doctor. Now, see, sometimes, and the detour feels like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, look how much I've invested in this, and it's for something better. See, sometimes our plans, those happen to us. Sometimes, a thing that happens to us is something like this, is that we get too much foliage, too much leaves. Plants do that, right? And you have to cut them so that the sun can come and get other places. So maybe that relationship that you had ended because you needed more sun somewhere. Or maybe that sickness occurred because you needed to expose another area in you to the sun. See, there's stuff like that Christians start to believe. That's the pruning. Or my friend Bill, whenever he one time I was with him when he was pruning, and he had this edge of the plant, and guess what he did? Cut off 6 of them. I was dying. I was like, this can't be. This can't be. And that's why he has dinner plate-sized roses, you see. So sometimes we're overburdened. Sometimes we make too many commitments, you see. And that happens in all kinds of different ways. Like as, we have the community hub and we have discipleship group, and one of our members was both. Maybe that's too much, you see. I remember whenever I had my business, I on my website I boasted 72 various departments. So I had 72 different topics that I trained. And I wasn't getting many hits on my website. And then someone who was much smarter than me about business said to me, Regis, just because no one believes that you're even capable with 72, So I got it down to 3. That's right. See, this is what happens, we help each other when we get overextended. Like recently, there was a member of the church saw that I was getting overextended and said, Regis, take the weekend off. And I did. And boy, did ever things become bright for me. See, that's the pruning pieces, what happens to us in our lives. And then there's these little ego rants that we go on. Like, I remember this one time, I was in a course, and I was just so excited about this course, and so everything the teacher was saying, I was like making a comment, or I answered all the questions, and eventually he said to me, Regis, you don't have to answer all the questions. A little bit of tapping down, Or I had a friend who was, on a dating site, on social media, and he was on for 15 years. This is kind of funny. He was on it for 15 years, and so he had the same picture that he had on 15 years ago. 15 years later, and he was 32 15 years ago, and so he was on, didn't change his picture, and he was on there kind of like going around and talking to a couple people in the chat room, and this one person says, I've been talking to you 15 years ago, and that's the same picture, and you're still 32? and he said, oh my God, I had to get off that site. See, he had an ego brush, you see. And then I got permission from Alan to tell this story. It's the cutest little story. We had on Wednesday night, we had, we have the service. So, Kelly, and her 2 little boys, Tyler and Luke, okay, their grandparents came, okay, so their grandparents came, and so I always ask them whenever they're here, I say, hey, you going to help me out today? And they come in and help me out, and there's not much to help me out with, like they can bring the wine over, that's basically what it does, but they're the cutest things, because they'll stand by me, and they'll do everything I do, like I put my hands up, they're there, and Yes. It's so cute. I mean, it's so cute. So anyway, I went over to him before the service began, and I said, you guys want to help me today? And Lou says, yeah, because I knew in front of their grandparents, So I'm thinking, well, there's not much for them to do. And so what I say, now Ellen is right here. Okay. And so I say to them, well, I'm going to have you do something new tonight. I'm going to have you wash my hands. Okay? So, and they're going, and I said, Ellen, do we have a bowl? And she goes, now, I may be exaggerating, but you know I'm gay. Okay, so anyway, so she and I go walking in here, and I'm thinking, what must be the case for that was the purificator, like it's going to be the purificator and stuff like that, and it will have to be ironed and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I'm thinking. So I say, hey, why don't we just do a paper towel? And then I said, total relief on her. See those kind of interesting things where we have to. I think I'm going to get pruned after this. But we have those, don't we? We have those little things where we just have our plans, but then someone else comes and says, well. So those are what we call the prunings that occur. Now, prunings are happening not for those to get cut off and cast away. See, prunings are for those who are attached. See, that's the good news. Sometimes those prunings can be devastating. I mean, the single mother that is trying to make ends meet for his kids and experiencing loneliness, and where do you turn? Or one of our prisoners, I can remember, losing his job and then being so qualified, but getting no offers and hearing that the economy is great, and then finally he lands an offer, like the pruning that goes on. Or, I had to deal with this, but some of you have to deal with this. You have a loved one who day by day is starting to fail. Through whatever situation it is, you just see that they're changing, and it just breaks your heart. My mother had Alzheimer's, so watch that. Oh my God, just goes on. I mean, see, but we're attached. That's pruning. That's an important way for us to see it. So sometimes our life situations, feel like death blows. But just remember, we have a good vine dresser. We have, our vine dresser is the Father. See, our Father is not mean-spirited. Our Father would never fire you 20 hours before your retirement kicks in. See, it's not vengeful. It's not vengeful. Our Father knows exactly the surgical cuts to make. And sometimes, it gets confusing for us. So what I think we have to remember whenever those situations occur, they're not cutaways. They are simply prunes that are occurring for us. We have to remember that Jesus abides in us as we abide in Him. We have to remember that Jesus loves us. Jesus holds us all throughout the process. And so these are not times that you give up. These are not times that you say, I'm leaving the church. These are not times that you lose your belief in God. These are times that you say, I'm in the Father's hands. Vine dresser knows better than I sometimes. Just wait it out, and I'll also be growing dinner plate size roses.